Quotation from myself, segment 47, quotation number 575. The most trivial pronouncements can acquire, by incessant repetition, the appearance of universal significance. Whether by just rereading the same text again and again, or which is even more effective in producing the above-mentioned results, by assiduously analyzing literally every word or phrase of it, which is done quite often with poetry, one almost inevitably is bound to find some hidden meaning in merits, both in substance and in the form, where none were apparent before. For there is this inherent power in the words themselves, each of which representing the accumulated experience and distilled wisdom of the countless preceding generation. Moreover, almost every word is pregnant with a multiplicity of meanings and evokes a variety of emotions and multitude of associations. This power is of such a potency that a mere concentration on a single word is capable of eliciting the most eager response from the reader, a response resonating in his heart and mind. 576. No one wants to be totally unknown. Yet, there is a certain advantage in being faceless, since one cannot lose what one, to all intent and purpose, does not have. For not being afraid to lose one's face frees an individual to be himself both in his behavior and opinions. That is why the representatives of the lower classes of society behave much more naturally and express their opinions much more sincerely than the members of the upper ones. 577. At the critical point in the development of Western civilization, when science began to stir after more than 1,000 years of slumber and started to threaten the omniscience of the Church, St. Thomas Aquinas provided the Christianity and any other religions with a seemingly invincible weapon to be used for centuries to come against the ever-increasing assault on faith, but the inexorable progress of the man's knowledge of nature. According to Thomas Aquinas, since it was God who in creating man had endowed him with reason and scientific abilities, and now is a quote, the knowledge of the principles that are known to us naturally has been implanted in us by God, end of quote, nothing that men do can deny the existence of God. Another quote, the truth that the human reason is naturally endowed to know cannot be opposed to the truth of the Christian faith, end of quote. Thus, Thomas Aquinas had absolved the Church from the burdensome necessity not only to defend itself from each and every new and ostensibly undermining the very foundation of faith, scientific discovery, for example, laws of gravity, theory of revolution, etc., but even to explain it from the theological point of view. Furthermore, since the divine truth, as revealed in Scriptures, is by definition the greatest truth possible, no other truth, either of angels or mortal men, can ever supersede it. In addition, because the divine truth is twofold, when, quote, one kind of divine truth, the investigation of the reason is competent to reach, whereas the other surpasses every effort of reason, end of quote, and moreover, when the former, the truth of reason, is presumed to be automatically included as a part in the later, the revealed truth, any attempt to find contradiction between them is futile, for a part cannot be contrary to the whole. Quote, natural reason cannot be contrary to the truth of faith, end of quote. But such and similar arguments Thomas Aquinas had erected a wall which made the faith, in the eyes of the Catholic scholars at least, impregnable to any present or future revolutionary scientific discoveries. It is no wonder, therefore, that 7 centuries later, his thoughts are still accepted by theologians as one of the profoundest and most creative statements of religious doctrine ever written. 578. The God of Thomas Aquinas is a kind of universal General Motors, for what is good for him is good for the whole universe. He is also a trickle-down God, since by loving himself, he, being everything, loves by extension everything and everybody else. But above everything else, he is the universal of the all-universal, the universal genus, though Thomas Aquinas denied, for genus is an abstract notion having no substance and being independently the very opposite of what God is supposed to be. 579. Looking at the overwhelming majority of paintings, it is hard to avoid the conclusion that to be a painter, one has to have an enormous capacity for self-deception, to believe that the pale and often grossly distorted imitation of reality, which even the best of painters often produce, is anything but a frozen caricature of the living and breathing world. 580. Philosophy may instruct us to compare the relative advantages and disadvantages of various actions or inactions, but the vicissitudes of life seldom allows us the freedom of choice. 581. What can be said about a culture that so frequently uses the game of baseball as a universal metaphor? 582. Some people, hopefully the majority, and according to their abilities, want to know the world. Others, fortunately the minority, and in proportion to their ambition, want the world to know them. As a result, the convergence of both those sentiments and attributes in one person is extremely rare. But when it occurs, either a great villain or a great hero is produced. Of course, those of us who are inclined to be cynical may even suggest that quite often the difference between the former and the latter is mainly in the eyes of the beholder. 583. The very young, the very old, and the very sick all share in common the need to rely on somebody else's goodness of heart for satisfaction of even the most basic necessities, including essential biological functions of life, as well as dealing with the anger and frustration resulting from the overwhelming sense of absolute powerlessness and total dependence. The child cry, the elder's demand, the sick's complaints are just a different expression of the same feeling and emotions. 584. I have never met anyone who did not have an overall positive opinion of oneself or could be convinced otherwise. And even those few who would admit their imperfections or confess their sins thought of themselves nevertheless very highly for being so self-critical and honest, if for nothing else. 585. Though being optimistic is considered to be a highly desirable state of mind, yet there is a certain and even a bitter irony hidden in it. For looking at it from a different perspective discloses a rather unsettling condition of being perpetually not fully satisfied with the present and forever expecting the real happiness in the future. Unless, of course, such an anticipation of the future bliss is in itself a sufficient cause for being happy in the present. 586. If you want to be liked, and who doesn't, think of those people whom you like yourself. What is it that is likable about them? And then try as much as you can to emulate them. 587. As for me, there is no God but truth, and I am her servant. The more one is different from anyone else, the less one is understood by everybody else. So to those individuals who are constantly complaining about being misunderstood, I would say, stop complaining, get rid of your individuality, and join the crowd. And I suspect that many eventually do. That is why the crowd is so big, and is getting bigger and bigger every day. 589. Doing the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong things to do. 590. People without a natural sense of humor, when trying to sound witty, present, in my opinion, one of the most pathetic and ridiculous spectacles of human nature. 591. Once upon a time, and it must have been a long, long time ago, for it is increasingly feeling like that, the painters were taught first how to draw and then how to paint. But nowadays, it often seems as if the major subject of their studies is a rhetoric or art of persuasion. For more and more the public has to listen to what they are saying instead of looking at what they are painting. 592. Generally speaking, people could be divided into essentially different classes. To one belong those who feel good about spending money and correspondingly bad about saving them. To others, those who feel exactly the opposite, good about saving and bad about spending. By comparison, all other differences between these two contrasting groups should be considered as either derivative or accidental.